Have you ever practiced in a speech for weeks, only to find it doesn't work when you get it in front of a live audience? Words don't flow. The message doesn't get across. And the whole speech just lies there. This happens when you have a great speech delivery, but the wrong style. Style is very important. It's something that we have with us, probably don't think much about, but it's the way we're most comfortable with presenting ourselves. It's the way we naturally present ourselves. And when our speech doesn't match our style, there are all sorts of problems. Now, there are many different possible styles out there. I'm only going to focus on 3 today. One is the storytelling style. 2 is the teaching style. 3 is the humorous style. The storytelling style we've talked about before. It's about a person who needs to tell a story, wants to tell a story. And their way of communication naturally is stories. If someone asks them, how far is it to the nearest grocery store? They're going to come up with a story about the grocery store and what happened the last time they were there and what they bought and how much it cost and how much problems it was in finding it. Because they naturally tell stories. That's the storytelling style. It's easy to recognize in yourself and in others. Just look for it. Look for those people who naturally tell those interesting stories everybody is hooked in on and wants to hear more about. If you're one of those people, you're a storyteller and should use the storytelling style. Another style is the teaching style. This is my style. I'm someone who always wants to be teaching people something. I want people to learn. If people listen to a speech of mine and they don't get any new ideas in their head, or they don't learn anything, to me, that's not a good speech. They always have to be learning. They always have to be developing. Always has to be something there they're getting out of that speech. Very important. Because by nature, I'm a teacher, so this teaching style works best for me. Probably because I come from a family of teachers. Everybody in my family teaches, and so I too am a teacher. The final style we'll talk about is the humorous style. Now, of course, it's good to tell jokes, it's fun to be witty, but the humorous style is more than that. The humorous style is the focusing on the joke. The whole point is the joke. One of the best examples of the humorous style is the comedian. The whole purpose of the comedian is to get up there on stage, tell a joke, and make everybody laugh. If people aren't laughing, then the comedian hasn't given a good speech. You are a person who does the humorous style if you're always trying to get people to laugh. You're always looking for the funny side of things. If you are, it makes you a humorist. And if you're a humorist, then the humorous style is going to work best for you. You try to tell a speech and you do it in a straight style or a storytelling style or even a teaching style, it won't work. It has to be funny, has to be humorous, because that's the way things work for you. There are many different styles we haven't mentioned. The important thing to think about as you're listening to this is figuring out what is your own style. What are the things that indicate what style a person is? So we'll talk more about these 3 styles: storytelling, teaching, humorist. But just remember, there are lots of different styles out there. And one of those styles fits you and how you do things. So when you're up there for your next speech, be aware what your style is. Do a little work beforehand, thinking about what your style is and how your style works. Now, to help you understand that, to help you figure out your style, let's start out with the storytelling style. Storytelling is great because it hooks the audience and it pulls them in. Storytelling is human, and it connects us in because it shows the audience just like them. The same sort of experiences, the same sort of ups and downs in life as they do. So if you're a storyteller, you're in a great position. And you know you're a storyteller if everything you do becomes a story. No matter what it is, the smallest events, the biggest events, all becomes a story. That's a natural storyteller. And to make your stories work the best, when you're doing public speaking, 3 things you want to think about. First is setting the stage. Then, take the journey. And finally, make the point. A lot of perfectly good stories don't go anywhere because the storyteller forgets to set the stage. They don't explain what's going on. So in their story, they refer to Jim. They say, Jim said, but the audience has no idea who Jim is, why he's saying something, what it matters in the story, or even what he looks like. You set the stage, try to describe all the people in your story with as many senses as possible. What do they look like? What do they sound like? What do they hear like? What do they taste like? What do they smell like? What sort of feelings do they have? When you look at them, what do you see? All these questions have to do with setting the stage. You don't want to answer too many questions. You want the audience to be able to imagine a few things in their head so they can personalize the story for themselves. But you do want to add in details. To make the story interesting, make the story real. So you set the stage, bring your characters alive for the audience. Once you set the stage, it's time to take the journey. A lot of perfectly good stories start having problems because the storyteller doesn't really take the journey. They talk about what's going on, but nothing happens. Stories, the most important thing is conflict. You have to have conflict. Conflict will drive the rest of the story. So your stories, you have little places of ups and downs, and maybe big ups and maybe big downs. And it's this up and down motion of the story that pulls the audience in. You take the journey of your story and you go up and down. The audience wants to see, where's that story going? Where's it going to end up? What's down the road in that story? That's what gets people interested, taking that journey. Finally, making the point. Maybe right now as a storyteller, your stories don't have any point. That happens. But when you're storytelling in front of an audience, there has to be a point. And you want to make sure that point is clear. Now to make this happen, one thing you can do is go to test audiences. Try it out in a few of your friends. After you tell the story, ask them, what's the point of this story? You're going to get different answers. Some answers you never would have thought of on your own. And it's by taking all these different answers, the different ideas of what the point is, that you can create for yourself a wonderful point. Now, in making the point, you don't have to say, the point of my story is. You want to make when people leave that story, they get the point. That the point is there. So test that out with your test audiences too. Do you understand the point? Does it make sense? Always make a point in your story. Different people may focus on different things and get different parts of the point or focus on different parts of the point. but there should be a point to those stories. People should walk away from your stories feeling they got something, feeling that the story changed them in some way. They're richer having heard the story. Storytelling is wonderful because it really hooks the audience and pulls them in. People love stories and love to hear stories. So if you're a storyteller, that's great. And if you're doing storytelling in front of an audience, 3 things you want to think about. Setting the stage, using as many different senses as you can to make that story come alive. Then taking the journey and making sure you have plenty of conflict in your story. There should be some ups and some downs in the story to hook the audience, pull them in, and make them wonder what's going to happen at the end. And then at the end of your story, make a point. There should be a point. The audience should walk away richer having heard your story. People love stories, and if you're a storyteller, getting up in front of an audience and telling a story is a wonderful experience. Keep in mind these 3 things we've talked about, and you'll love telling your stories, and your audience will love hearing them. You're the sort of person who always wants people to learn, who wants to make sure when your audience leaves your speech, they know something they didn't know before. Wants to make sure your audience is always educated. You're a teacher. You need to use the teaching style. And when you're teaching, there are 4 things you want to think about. 4 things you really want to have going through your mind as you're teaching, as you're educating your audience. They're all part of the teaching style. And the first thing is you want to have a concrete point. Concrete examples. Secondly, you want to get the audience involved. Thirdly, you need to build on the audience's experience. And fourth, you need to use signposts to help the audience understand. First thing is concrete examples. When you're talking to your audience, you really want them to understand what you're saying. And if you say it's sort of like, it's kind of like, I don't really know, but I've heard, won't work. Have to use concrete examples. Have to use examples that are definite, really work, and that the audience then can understand what you're talking about. One thing you can do is just use your own experience. If you're doing some type of a grief counseling, you can say, when I lost my parents, I felt, describe how you felt. That's a concrete example. It's definite. You could use statistics in some other situations, that's fine too, but you don't need to use statistics. Just make sure your examples are definite and clear. And when you give those examples, you want to make sure that you get the audience involved. It's not enough just to simply give the examples and just let it go at that in your speech. Because in this speech, you want to get the audience involved in what's going on. And sure, in the examples, you're going to talk about definite things the audience can relate to. But you want to make sure you get the audience doing something. And one thing you can do is get the audience writing things down. That works okay. The problem is if the audience is so busy writing things down, they're not paying attention to your speech. So something you can do instead is just get people to raise their hands. You can start out a speech by saying, how many people here drove to my speech? Get a show of hands. That gets the audience involved. It's that simple gesture of the hand raise gets the audience involved in interacting in the speech. The other thing that I mentioned was you need to make sure that you have examples that really build on the audience's experience. Your audience out there has a huge experience. huge experience of the way their life is. If you giving a speech and it doesn't have examples that really work with them, really connects with them, then there's going to be a problem. For instance, if you're doing a grief counseling speech and all you can talk about is how wonderful and happy you're there and you've never lost, it's not going to work because it's completely outside your audience's experience. So you want to build on that experience. Given a grief counseling thing, you talk about experience that you had, that the audience can all relate to. And then you build on that. Once you get the audience hooked in at that level, you can talk more about that experience, how it was for you, and then get the audience thinking about how it was for them, how they're going to handle it, how they're going to deal with it. Very important to build on the audience's experience. If you leave the audience's experience completely out of it, the audience won't care about your speech. They won't learn anything, and you're just wasting your time flapping your gums up there. No good. Build on their experience. And to help them along the way so they can follow along with what you're saying, use signposts. Signposts are simply little things you do to help you keep track of where you are in the speech. For instance, I'm speaking. Here I try to say point 1, point 2, point 3. Each point is a signpost. Here's point 1, here's point 2, here's point 3. Helps you keep track of where the speech is, what's happening. Make sure you use signposts in your speech. Help the audience understand where you are. If you're the sort of person who is always trying to get people to understand or to learn or is excited about learning or thinks their speech isn't any good unless somebody walks away with a new idea or a new thought, you're a teacher. You need to use teaching style. And the teaching style is about focusing on concrete information, getting the information concrete, down to earth, definite examples. And then making sure that the audience is involved. Get the audience involved with what you're talking about. Make sure they're always involved, they're always present in your speech. And build on the audience's experience. Whatever experience they're having, build on that. Show how you too have the same experience. So you better connect in with your audience. And leave signposts. Your audience can't read your speech. All they've got is you up there talking. So leave signposts along the way to help them follow along with your speech. If you're a teacher, you're an educator, you're using the learning style, get excited to see your audience learn and do this. You follow these 4 tips, and you can make your audience understand and learn and grow and feel the excitement of leaving your audience better off than they were before. Darren LaCroix once said, "I don't want to brag or anything, but I took a $60,000 debt, and in just 3 short months, I doubled that debt." That's right. I took my Subway sandwich shop and I turned it into a non-profit organization. If you're someone who can see the funny in anything and find the funny in going into debt and losing your franchise that you paid for, you're a humorist. And you need to use a humorous style in your speaking. Now, there are a lot of things that can be said about humor. I want to focus on 3. First, it's about you. Second, make it big. And 3, find the humorous style that works best for you. One of the most important things to learn when you're telling humorous stories is that when problems happen to us, problems happen to you as a speaker, that's funny. When problems happen to the audience and people in the audience, that's not funny. Just remember that one thing, you'll be fine. It's okay to joke about any problems you have and laugh as much as you want and get the audience to laugh as much as you want. Hey, that's funny. Bad things happen to us as a speaker, fine. The audience doesn't find their problems funny. When you laugh at your audience, you're just asking for trouble. So don't do that. Humorous speaking, always make fun of yourself, never your audience. The other thing to keep in mind with humor is it's always about making it big. Humor always has to be big and better and better. Notice that in Darren LaCroix's speech. Darren, by the way, went on to become a world champion of public speaking based on that speech. He starts out with a $60,000 debt, and then the debt doubles. It gets bigger. He also starts out with one joke about a debt, and he makes it into two. He talks about how he doubles his debt as being an achievement, and he talks about how he turns his organization into a non-profit organization. So that's two achievements in the joke. Always make it bigger and make it bigger. The thing that makes humor work so well is if it just gets bigger and bigger and just starts to just explode. A very funny show that was on a while back was called Fawlty Towers, and it featured a person called Basil. And Basil always got in these funny situations because they just keep building and building. He had a hotel. So when a rat got loose in his hotel, that was a problem. When Basil chased after the rat, that was another problem. When Basil chased after the rat in the middle of the dining room, that was a third problem. When the health inspectors were on the same day, Basil was in the dining room chasing after the rat, that was a very funny problem. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's what humor is about. And finally, you want to find a humorous style that works for you. People will make fun of different things, and certain things will just click with it, will just work. For some people, it's family. They love to talk about their family. They love to make fun of all the bizarre things going on in their family. For others, it's about how different things are from where they were. It's like being a stranger in a strange land. If you grew up in one area or one culture, and you're suddenly moved to a different culture, you can talk about how different these two cultures are and make that funny. In some cases, you just look at normal things in a kind of strange way. Jerry Seinfeld created a whole career as a comic by taking perfectly normal things that everybody looked at every day and twisting them a little bit and looking at them differently and finding the funny in the normal things. Another possibility is to find the funny. You can take a serious question and have a funny answer to it. That's another way to develop your humor. That's another humorous style. In the cartoon Peanuts, Lucy says to Linus, "The world is getting bigger and bigger. There are massive problems everywhere. The world is overcrowded. The world can't feed this many people." And Linus turns to Lucy and says, "Why don't you leave?" Lucy had a very serious question, and Linus had a very funny answer. If you're the sort of person who can find humor in anything that goes on, including massive debt, then you're a humorist and you need to use a humorous style for your speaking. Keep in mind the three things we talked about. It's always about you, the speaker, never about your audience. Everything bad happens to your audience is not funny. Make it big out of proportion. Just make it huge up there on stage. Remember, like in Fawlty Towers. And find the humorous style that works best for you. Find out where the funny really happens in your life. Maybe start writing down things that you think are really funny, or when people say really funny things, and see if all these things have to do with certain areas in your life. you're a humorist, you need to use a humorous style. Find the funny in your life, and find the funny in your speeches. We talked a lot today about 3 different styles: storytelling, teaching, and humorous. There's a lot of information there, and hopefully it helps you if you're a storyteller, a teacher, or a humorist. But if you remember nothing else, just remember one thing. You need to find your style. The style that works best for you. Maybe it's storytelling, maybe it's teaching, maybe it's humorous, maybe it's something else. Find your style, find your speech.